سلام به همگی. سلام، وقتتون بخیر. سلام علیکم. سلام علیکم. عصر همگی بخیر. بله دیگه شب شده. شب همگی بخیر. Hello to you all. Hello Mr. Tahir. Hello Mr. Zovaid. Excuse me if I pronounce your name differently. Please tell me so I know the right pronunciation. Hello Mr. Ash-Sharifi. Hello Mr. Tahir. Hello Mr. Kashash. Hello Mr. Jawad. Hello Mr. Ali. Hello Miss Alloza. Hello Mr. Abbas. Hello Mr. Ali Yaseri. Hello Mr. Abid. Hello Mr. Al-Hajami. Hello to you all. Hello Mr. Al-Ma'muri. Hello Mr. Az-Zubaydi. Hello Miss Al-Rafiq. سلام همگی. وقتتون بخیر. وقت بخیر. Hello to you all. Thank you for participating in this class. In the previous session, we talked about the RUP process. So if you have any question about RUP, please tell me. If you have any question about RUP, please ask your questions. Thank you very much. So in our today's session, we're going to talk about agile processes, and we will start our course with the Scrum process. Before starting the class, I will upload the slides of our new chapter, our new session. Salamun alaikum. So I'm going to turn off my microphone. It will help the slides to be uploaded faster. And after the slides are uploaded, they are going to upload now. They are uploading now. Then we will start our class. About 1 or 2 minutes. It will take about 1 or 2 minutes, and then we will start our class. The slides are uploading. After about 1 minute, 1 or 2 minutes, we will start. Yes, Miss Aloza, I'm uploading a slide. Hello, Miss Naeem. Salam. Yes, Mr. Az-Zubaidi, I will upload this slide. Excuse me, because I don't ha I had two accounts. I think that my voice had echoes. I will upload this slide today. I didn't upload it because I wanted to first discuss about it in the class, and after that I will upload so you can read this. Okay, if there is not any question about the previous session, we can start our today's session on agile methodologies. بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم. Agile methodologies are one of the most practiced and known methodologies in today's software engineering industry. And in this course, we're going to introduce some of the agile methodologies like Scrum. Scrum is also one of the most known agile methodologies, and it is very common in the industry, especially with the emerge of mobile applications that provide a good platform for small team members and also small projects. We have so many applications that are developed with small uh, teams, and they are very good projects for practicing agile methodologies. Especially Scrum is very popular among these uh, development teams because of its straightforward process, which is very clear, very lightweighted. It's not very complicated or and don't add to the complexity of the project. So the first methodology from the agile categories that we're going to introduce in our class is Scrum. Before talking about the Scrum itself, we were going to have a brief history on agile methodologies. They were first appeared in 1995, and one's common perception of these methodologies in those days was that the agile methodologies are nothing but controlled code and fix approaches, because the development part of the project is very bold in the agile methodologies, because we have much less documentation, uh, much less emphasis on designing and analyzing, and also on documentation and process. Um, it was thought that these approaches are just controlled code and fix, with little or no sign of a clear-cut process, which is not true, but it was influential in the minority. Agile methodologies are essentially based on practices of program design, code, and test. So the most important parts of the most important artifact in the agile methodologies is a working software. And the agile methodologies are emphasized on flexibility and also productivity of software development. We want to have the much work done with less complication, with less documentation, with less modeling. And also we want to have flexibility in these methodologies, because in our today's businesses, so much requirements are changing, and we need to adapt our project and also our software with these changing requirements. Another thing that is important in agile methodologies is that although they incorporate explicit processes, but they try to keep these processes as lightweight as possible. So in agile methodologies, we have process. If you remember from the first slide, in each methodology consists of two parts. First, a process, and second, a modeling language. In agile methodologies, we mostly use UML modeling language, and they have their own processes. They have explicit processes, but the processes that we have in agile methodologies are very lightweight. They don't have um, they also don't have much complexity like the integrated methodologies or the seminal methodologies. In this picture, we can see the evolution map of agile methodologies, as you see here. In about 1990, the start of these methodologies is with the emerge of object-oriented approaches and development of UML in 1998. We have different methodologies. We have the Crystal family of methodologies in 1998 and XP in 1999, and adaptive software development in 2000, pragmatic programming in 2000. So we have these methodologies later, but the Scrum was first introduced in the software engineering domain in 1995 and then in 2001. In agile methodologies, we have the Agile Manifesto, which is the difference between which can define the difference between these methodologies and previous methodologies like integrated methodologies like RUP or other methodologies that have different emphasis on different goals in software engineering process. In agile methodologies, we have come to value some. We have come to value some items in the left over the items on the right. We have some items in the left that are bold, which are more important in agile methodology than the items in the right. Yes, Mr. Aliosari. They are called agile because they want to have faster releases. They want to have faster delivery to the customer, to the user, and also because they don't want to have a lot of documentation, a lot of modeling. They don't want to carry a big burden of modeling and documentation and analyzing. They want to create a working version of the software as soon as possible. So the name tells us that they don't want to have a lot of analyzing. They don't want to have a heavyweight, complicated process, and also they want to have fast delivery to their user. Yes, Mr. Aliosari? Okay. The items that are in the left and in the right are both important in agile methodologies and in other methodologies. But based on the processes that we have and based on the goals that we have in each methodology, we focus in some of these items more than other items. In agile methodologies, the items in the left are more important than the items in the right. So what are these? In agile methodologies, we value individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So in agile, individuals and interactions are more important than processes and tools. In agile methodologies, we usually have small teams with very eager individuals, very motivated individuals, with skilled persons that want the project to be successful. And also these team members, these small teams, usually have good interactions with each other. And in agile methodologies, we want to have a good and an optimized interaction between our team members. In some other methodologies, for example, in RUP, the process is more important than the individuals. We have a heavyweight controlled process, and we expect that different individuals can work together if we have a good process. In agile methodologies, the goal is different. So, and also we have a smaller team. So individuals and interactions between them is more important than the process. And also in agile methodologies, the working software is more important than comprehensive documentation. So we value working software over comprehensive documentation. In agile methodologies, we do the documentation. We document every part of the process or the product if it is needed. So we don't have lots of documentation. We don't want to have lots of modeling. We will use modeling. We model the system if it is needed. So working software is more important than comprehensive documentation. In agile methodologies, we also value customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So although we might have a contract and we might negotiate over the contract, but the collaboration with the customer and the collaboration of the customer with development team, with developers, is more important than that contract. So we want to have a good collaboration with our customer. We want to make our customer satisfied, and also we want to have a customer who can collaborate with our developers over the time, over the process of software development. In agile methodologies, responding to changes is very, very important. And although we're going to have plans, we're going to plan our process and we want to follow that plan. But if we have requirement changes, we're going to respond to those changes. And we're going to replan. We're going to change our plan based on those requirement changes. So it's very important to respond to change. As you see in agile methodologies, we have the items in the right. In agile methodologies, we have process. We document our process and our product. We can have a contract, we plan and we follow the plan. But the left items are more important than the right. So we're going to focus on the left items. In agile methodologies, we also have some principles. These principles are based on the Agile manifesto that we have in the previous slide. Based on these manifesto, we're going to have Agile principles. We have different principles in Agile methodologies, and each one of them are very important, especially the first one, which is the which shows the priority of satisfying customer. Okay, what are the Agile methodologies principles? Let's talk about the principles of Agile methodologies. The first principle in Agile methodologies is the priority of customer satisfaction. The highest priority in Agile methodologies is to have a satisfied customer, a happy customer. And how we're going to do that? We in Agile methodologies, we try to deliver early. We want to produce, we want to develop the first version of the first increment of our software as soon as possible. So we're going to have early delivery. And also we're going to have continuous and iterative delivery. We can have different increments, different versions of our system delivered frequently. So using that iterative and continuous delivery of valuable software, we want to have a happy customer that can see the new versions of the software with more functionality, with more features, and also we can use feedback of the customer to improve the previous versions of the software in new deliveries. The next principle is that in Agile methodologies, we're going to welcome every requirement change, even if they are late in the development process. So we're going to be open to every changes, and we're going to adapt our project or our software, our product based on those changes because of the customer's competitive advantage. The next principle is that delivering for working software frequently is very important, and the time can be from a couple of weeks to a couple of months, but we prefer the shorter time. So we prefer to have delivery in every week or every few weeks. The next principle is that we want to have business people working together with developers on daily basis. So as Agile methodologies are very common in softwares that are tangled with business goals, it's very important to have business people beside our developers. The next principle is that we want to build our projects around motivated individuals. It's very important to have skilled persons, skilled developers, which are motivated, which are eager to see the project to be successful. And also, we want these individuals to have a good environment, to have the support they need, and we want to trust them and let them do their job and let them do the best that they can. The next principle is that the most efficient and also effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. So it's very important in agile methodologies that our team members have face-to-face conversation on a daily basis, because we think that the most efficient and effective method of transferring information within our development team is just by face-to-face conversation. Yes, Mr. Abid. The error rate is, I assume the error rate is high. At least it's not low. You know, agile methodologies are not good for software that are very critical. For example, for software in the safety critical domain. For example, you can't develop a software for a airplane as an automatic pilot using agile methodologies. Okay, agile methodologies are not good for developing software for an airplane. They're not good for building softwares for big projects. They're not good for building complicated projects. And they're not good for developing softwares that are very new, softwares that are using new technologies. The errors are bad design, not error, bad design. Having not a high quality software. For example, if security is very important for you, maybe you can't use agile methodologies. If you have a very important software, very complicated software, you can't have agile methodologies. Okay, so if you want to have a good design, no, it's not the comparison between agile to others, because agile methodologies are very good today. If you want to create a small game, for example, a game for mobile phones, okay, it's very good. So many of web applications, so many of mobile applications can be built using agile methodologies. Most of the business applications can be developed using agile methodologies. But these methodologies are not good for complicated projects, are not good for big projects. If you want to build an enterprise software, then it's not good to use agile methodologies. Yes, Mr. Al-Hajami. Working software means when you create the software, the first iteration, the first delivery, the first increment, you can the customer can take that software and can run that software, can use that software. For example, remember the Instagram, the first version of the Instagram, it was not as complicated, it was not as big as today's software. Yes, it was a very small software, but it was working, it was good. People can use that. Um, yes, Mr. Ali Yaseri, yes. The desire of customer can define the satisfaction of customer, okay? But you can have a working software, a software that can be installed, a software that can be used, but the customer don't like it. It's not desirable, okay? So we can have a working software that can be installed, that can be used, but the customer don't like it. It's not desirable for customer. So working software don't depend on the desirability, on the satisfaction of the customer. It's a working software. It can be used. But if the customer don't like it, you should change it in your next version. In agile methodologies, yes, we have planning, we have design, and also development, of course. But the amount of planning, the focus in these methodologies is not on design, is not on planning. The focus is mostly on the working software. So if we have a working software but not a good design, maybe it's acceptable in agile methodology. Okay, so we have planning, we have design, but the emphasis is on the development. Yes, yes, Mr. Kashosh. No, 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 Mr. Abid, no, no. It means that if we created a software that is working, but the customer don't like it, we have the opportunity to change it. We were going to change it as the customer wishes. Okay? Sometimes we create the software, it is working, but there is some part that the customer don't like it. We ask the customer, we were going to deliver the first version and ask the customer what you need to change, what you like to change. And with the yes, yes, Mr. Abid, in the next version, in the next version. And also, we have the customer that is involved in the creation of the software. So most of the time, we ask about the needs of the customer. We ask the customer if he or she likes the software or not in the process of development, not at the end of creating the software. You're welcome. Thank you for your good questions. It's very good that you ask questions because I know that you are listening and you are participating in the class, and also I will learn from your questions too. So I'm very happy and I want you to ask your questions. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Abid. Uh, Thank you, Mr. Kashosh. Thank you, Mr. Ali Asari, for your questions. Thank you, Mr. Al Hajami. Okay, so I will continue. Anytime that you have any question, please ask your question. You're welcome, Mr. Azubaidi. You're welcome, Mr. Asharifi. Thank you for your questions. The next principle in agile methodology is that the working software is the primary measure of progress. So we can use measures based on the software for monitoring and for measuring our progress. It doesn't matter if we do a lot of modeling or a lot of documentation. It's very important to have the new delivery of our working software. We want to have a valuable software in every iteration, in every delivery. So it's very important to have a valuable software. The next principle is that agile processes promote sustainable development. We want to have sustainable development. We want to have a good pace of development day by day, week by week. So the sponsors, developers, users, and customers should be able to maintain a constant pace, especially for customers and users, because we want to use their ideas, we want to use their feedbacks as long as we are going to develop the process. So it's very important to have customers that collaborate with the development team. The next principle is that in agile methodologies, we want to have continuous attention to technical excellence. We want to have softwares that are technically excellent. And also, we want to have good design because good design can improve the quality of the final software, the result software. So it's very important to have good design. The next principle is simplicity. In agile methodologies, we don't like complication. We don't like complexity. We don't want to have a complicated process. We don't want to add to the complexity of the project of the product. So we want to know what part of the work is not necessary to do. It's very important to know which task is not necessary to do, which job is not necessary to do. For example, if some modeling is not, some part of the modeling is not essential, is not helping, we don't do that modeling because we don't want to complicate things. We don't want to add to our work. The next principle is that the best architecture requirement and design are done by self-organizing teams. In agile methodologies, we don't have big teams, and usually we don't have big hierarchies and hierarchy organizations that we have, or hierarchy structures that we have in big teams. And usually we have maybe under 10 team members. Uh, so it's very important to have individuals that are trusting and also disciplined. The structure of the team is usually flat, and each person is responsible for delivering its part of work, its part of development. So it's very important to have a self-organizing team. And the experiences of teams shows that self-organizing teams can create the best architecture, can propose the best designs. So agile methodologies are based on this type of teams, team structures. The next principle is that in agile methodologies, we usually reflect on how to become more effective. The team members uh, uh, in regular intervals try to reflect on their weaknesses and in their strengths and try to figure out how they can be more effective and then tune and adjust their behavior according to that so they can uh, develop the software more effectively. Yes, Mr. Obey. Uh, Small team size is sometimes positive and sometimes negative. If you have a big project, if you need to develop a software for a big company, you need a big team. You must have a big team. You can't develop a huge software using a small team. Okay? But if you have a small project, if you want to create a small web application or a small mobile application, then having a small team is positive. So it depends on the project that you're going to work on and develop it. Generally, we can't say that small team is good or bad. It depends on the situation. It depends on the project that you're going to develop. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so if you agree, we can start the Scrum process. The Scrum process was first mentioned as a development method in 1986, so it's very old, about 35 years ago. Uh, mm, that method was proposed and was practiced in Japanese manufacturing companies as a fast and flexible product development process. So it has a root in Japanese companies. But in 1995, Mr. Sutherland and Schwaber, they proposed a variant of that process, that Scrum process for software development. So although the Scrum was proposed and was practiced since 35 years ago, but using this method, using this process in software engineering industry gets back to 1995. The name of Scrum is derived from the rugby game and emphasizes the importance of teamwork. So in Scrum, the teamwork is very important, and it can be understood from the name. The Scrum was originally intended as a general framework for systems development, but today we have it as a comprehensive software development methodology. So, although it was first intended to be just a general framework, but today it is a comprehensive software development methodology. The process framework of Scrum is built upon values, principles, and practices. The process framework of Scrum is a people-centric framework. So in Scrum, having a good team, having good team members is very, very important. The people, the individuals, the developers that you have in your Scrum, different roles that you have in your Scrum are very important. Each one of your team members are very important to be skilled individuals and also motivated individuals. We have values, principles, and practices that create the foundation of an organization that can implement the Scrum and that can realize the Scrum practices. The values in the Scrum methodology are honesty, openness, courage, respect, focus, trust, empowerment, and collaboration. So when we want to select our team members, it's very important to select people that have the same values as these: honesty, openness, respect, trust, and collaboration. The principles in Scrum are those principles of agile methodologies, the principles that are based on the manifestation of agile methodology that we talked about in the previous slide. Scrum practices embodied in specific roles, activities, and artifacts. And also we have some associated rules. So Scrum practices have defined by roles, activities, and artifacts. The Scrum that we're going to talk about, we're going to introduce in this slide, in this course, are based on the Rubin's book published in 2012, and the Scrum guide that was published was updated in 2020. So we know the values, and we were introduced to principles in the previous slides. Let's talk about practices of Scrum. In this picture, you can see Scrum practices based on roles, activities, and artifacts. Scrum practices are based on roles, activities, artifacts, and some rules. What are the roles in a Scrum practice? We have product owner, we have Scrum Master, and we have developers, members of our development team. And please pay attention to the picture, to the icon that is used for each role. What are the activities? We have sprint planning, daily Scrum, sprint execution, sprint review, sprint retrospective, and product backlog grooming. So these are the activities that must be done by these roles. These roles will do these activities. And also please pay attention to the picture for each activity. And by doing these activities, we're going to produce these artifacts: product backlog, sprint backlog, and potentially shippable product increments. Product backlog, sprint backlog, and shippable product increment. In this picture, all the roles, activities, and artifacts are bring together briefly. But in the next slides, we will talk about all these roles and activities and artifacts. So first of all, let's talk about team roles. We had 3 roles: product owner, Scrum Master, and development team. Please pay attention to the picture. The picture is always the same: product owner, Scrum Master, and development team. We had these roles here: product owner, Scrum Master, and development team. We have these roles in the Scrum practices. So who are these roles? The product owner is responsible for what will be developed. What's the goal of this process? What's the goal of this project? What will be developed at the end of this project? And also, as we said before, in agile methodologies and in Scrum, we will have frequent and iterative delivery. So we're going to have iterative and frequent development. So we need to specify the order of developing different features or different functionality. This order is defined by the product owner. So product owner is responsible for defining what to develop and in what order develop them. The next role is the Scrum Master. Scrum Master is responsible for guiding the team and also for motivating the team. to continue the development and to follow the process of Scrum. The Scrum Master. The Scrum Master is like the leader of our developers, leader of our team. And the development team, our developers, they're responsible for determining how to deliver the product. They are responsible for developing what the product owner asks them to develop. So these three are the roles of Scrum. What are the activities and artifacts in the Scrum process? Okay, now I'm going to read your question. Miss Kashosh, you search the web and you okay, let me read your questions. First of all, Mr. Ali Yaseri. Yes, Mr. Ali Yaseri, the Scrum is now a complete methodology. And the most work is on development. Yes, it is true. In all agile methodologies, the most focus and the most work is on development. We focus on developing a good software. And the question of Mr. Al-Zubaydi. Scrum is one of the agile methodologies. The name of the category is agile methodologies. One of agile methodologies is Scrum. Let me say an example. For example, we have fruits. We have a category of fruits. Apple is one of the category of fruits. Agile is the name of category. Agile. Scrum is one of the agile methodologies. Scrum is one of the methodologies in that category, okay? And Mr. Obaid, the work is not hierarchical. No, the work is not hierarchical. This picture, it's not hierarchy. It's just categorization of roles, activities, and artifacts. Okay, it's not hierarchy. Okay. Thank you for your questions, and thank you for waiting for me to answer those questions. Okay, so we talked about roles. Now let's talk about activities and artifacts. The product owner has a big vision of what he wants to create, of what he wants at the end of the process. And the product owner will create a list of features that he or she wants to be created. A list. That list includes features that can create that big vision. After creating the list of features, the list of functionality that he wants, then he will do the activity that is named grooming. Grooming is one of the activities of Scrum, and it means to first prioritize the items in that list, and if it is needed, change that list. So The product owner has a vision. He will break down his vision into a list of features and functionalities, a set of features and functionalities. Then he will prioritize that list and put the most important and high priority items in the top of the list, and less important items, low priority items at the down of the list. That prioritized list is called a product backlog. So the product owner do the activity of grooming and create the artifact of product backlog. Product owner do the grooming and create the product backlog. The sprints, which are performed iteratively, consist of these parts, 4 parts. Each sprint includes first, sprint planning, second, execution, third, review sprint, and fourth, retrospective. So each sprint includes these 4 activities. What is the planning? At the beginning of each sprint, because we have different sprints, we can have lots of sprints. But at the beginning of each sprint, the development team, the developers select a subset of the product backlog. They look at the product backlog that the product owner created. They select a subset of those items in the product backlog, a set of features, and they commit to complete those features. They commit to complete those items in the product backlog. After selecting a subset of product backlog items, those selected items are creating a sprint backlog. So a sprint backlog is composed of the selected features, the most important, the high priority features of product backlog. The development team will create a set of detailed tasks for each item in the sprint backlog. For each feature, they create a set of detailed tasks that can identify how the team members are going to design, build, integrate, and test those features. Let me show you a big picture of Scrum process. We have a big picture of Scrum process here. This is the product owner. The product owner has a big vision. Okay? We have the product owner that has a vision of what he wants to create. Product owner should create a list of prioritized features, which is called product backlog. Where is the backlog? Where is the product backlog? We have the product backlog here. The product backlog. Product owner has a vision. He or she will break down his vision or her vision into a list of features. 1 feature, 2 features, 3 features, 4 features, 5 features, 6 features. A list of features. The most important features are at the top of the list, which are in dark blue. The most important features, high priority features, are at the top of the list. And less important features, low priority features, are at the bottom of the list. And they are in light blue. This is called the product backlog. And the work of prioritizing this list is named grooming. So product owner will do the grooming and create the product backlog. At the start of each sprint, the developers should plan the sprint. Sprint planning. Sprint planning means selecting some of the items in the product backlog, selecting some of the features for developing in that sprint. Developers, development team, select the most important features, the most important items from product backlog, and they create the sprint backlog. The sprint backlog includes those important features, and for each feature, for each item from the product backlog, for each item, they create a set of tasks. Including designing, planning, coding, testing that will create this feature. So for each feature, the development team will identify the task that is required for creating that feature. The feature number one is here with 3 tasks. Feature number two comes to sprint backlog, and development team will identify the tasks to do this feature. Feature number 3 comes to the sprint backlog, and the tasks that need to be done to complete this feature will be identified by the software development team. So in each sprint, we have first the sprint planning. The sprint planning includes these sub-steps. First, to select a subset of product backlog items, the most important ones, and then create a sprint backlog. A sprint backlog includes those selected features with a set of detailed tasks for each feature that determine how to design, how to build, how to integrate, how to test that selected feature. The next step in each sprint is sprint execution. Where is sprint execution in our big picture? Sprint execution is here. As you see, we have a sprint here. The sprint is shown by a big circle, a big gray circle. It is the sprint. The sprint starts with the product owner that creates the product backlog and do the grooming. Then development team will do sprint planning and create the sprint backlog. The next step is to do the sprint execution. Sprint execution. The second step is to do the sprint execution. After the product owner created the product backlog, we start our sprint, and first plan the sprint, second execute the sprint. Sprint execution includes developing those features, those selected features based on their detailed tasks that are created in the sprint backlog. So in sprint execution, the development team performs those detailed tasks, these detailed tasks, and create the selected features. Sprint execution first include doing the daily scrum each day. So in execution, Every day we will have a daily scrum. A daily scrum. The daily scrum means we have the scrum team to conduct a synchronization and inspection and adaptive planning activities on a daily basis. And you see here that the scrum team is supposed to be less than 10 members, 10 members or less. So scrum is good for small size teams. So in sprint execution, we have a daily scrum. Every day in our execution, the sprint execution can be, all the sprints can be about a month, 1 month, or a few weeks. So sprint execution can be about 1, 2, or 4 weeks. In all this time, in all the sprint execution, that we are going to develop the features in the sprint backlog and their subtask, the first feature, the second feature, the third feature. Every day we're going to have a daily scrum. Every day we're going to have a daily scrum in all those weeks or 1 month of sprint execution. So one part of the sprint execution is having a daily scrum, each day having a daily scrum. At the end of the execution, we are going to have a potentially shippable product increment. So after the sprint execution, we're going to have a new version of our software, a new delivery, a new release of our software. So a sprint execution has two sub-steps. First, having a daily scrum, each day having a daily scrum. Second, at the end of the execution, the team produced a potentially shippable product increment. This new increment represents some of the product owner's vision, some of the features that had a high priority in the product backlog and were selected and put into the sprint backlog. The development teams has been developed that features and created the new increment of our software. After sprint execution, we have the sprint review and sprint retrospective. Let's see the big picture. After a sprint execution and producing the new increment, we will do the sprint review and sprint retrospective, and then the sprint is finished. We have the first sprint finished, and then we can repeat this sprint repeat these works for a new sprint. Sprint reviews and sprint retrospective are briefly inspective and adaptive activities on the product, and on the process. So in sprint review, we're going to inspect and adapt the product. In the retrospective, we're going to inspect and adapt the process. And also, sprint review is done by stakeholders and Scrum team. The retrospective is done by only the Scrum team. The difference between sprint review and sprint retrospective. So you see that we have the sprint review and sprint retrospective in this picture. Yes, Mr. Obaid. In the agile methodologies, we usually don't have the design or the test as a separate activity. So in here, here in our features and in our subtask, we can have testing. In this subtask, we can have testing. In next slides, I will go through each one of these activities and I will show you that in sprint backlog, you can have some tests, automate tests. We have test here. Buffer test, we have test here. Automate test, we have test here. Okay, Mr. Obaid? Is it clear, Mr. Obaid? We have test. We can have test in subtasks. Thank you, Mr. Obaid, for your good questions. Thank you very much. Mr. Zobaid, Mr. Omar Ali Taleb Zobaid, or if I pronounce differently, please tell me so I can learn the correct pronunciation. If we consider the meaning of the form, the meaning of the form before creating the product, building and examination by developers, the product owner should do that. Okay, Mr. Zobaid? The product owner is responsible for his or her vision. Okay, so we don't test the vision of product owner, but we consider the meaning because we should know what the product owner wants. It's very important to have a clear understanding of what the product owner wants. Okay, if there is if I didn't understand your question correctly, please let me know. Yes, Mr. Al-Amar, yes, I will explain sprint backlog. This is the sprint backlog, okay? This is a sprint backlog. Okay, Mr. Zobaid, okay, thank you. If I didn't understand correctly, please tell me. So, or please tell me again about your question so I will understand it better. Okay, Mr. Al-Amar, about sprint backlog. We will explain more in the next slides, but briefly I want to say that product backlog is a very long list. You see here we have a long list. 1 item, 2 items, 3 items, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. A long list of features, a long list of items that product owner wants us to create. Product owner ask us to create all these features, to develop a software to have all these features. In each sprint, in every sprint, we can build a new version that have the most important features. So in each sprint, we select only the most important features. You see here that we have 4 dark blue features, 4 important features, but we selected only 3 of them. Feature number 1, feature number 2, feature number 3. We select these 3 features to develop them in this sprint. In the first sprint, we want to develop these 3 features. And for each feature, we create a set of tasks that must be done, a set of tasks that must be done to create these features, to develop these features. So the sprint backlog is a small list, a small set of most important features in the product backlog. We take the most important features from top of the product backlog and put them in the sprint backlog. Okay? Thank you, Mr. Al-Emar. Thank you, everyone, for your good questions. Okay, if you agree, we can continue the course. If you don't have any other question, we can continue the course. Thank you, Mr. Zulay. Thank you, Mr. Al-Emar. Now we can have a detailed description for each one of these activities and artifacts. The first artifact is product backlog. Please look at the picture, this picture. This is the product backlog, and in the big picture, the product backlog is here. We have the product backlog here. This is the product backlog. The list, only the list, this vertical list is the product backlog. This is one of the artifacts in the Scrum process. Who creates the product backlog? The product owner. The product owner is responsible for product backlog. He or she, the product owner, he or she can use the help of a Scrum team and other stakeholders, but he is responsible for determining the features in determining the items in the product backlog, and also for determining the order of these features. The first one, the second one, the third one. The order of product backlog is important because the high priority items are at the top and the low priority items are at the bottom of this list. Where is the product owner in the picture? Here we have the product owner. Product owner is responsible for the product backlog. Product owner is responsible for creating and maintaining the product backlog. At the first of the project, the product owner will create the product backlog by features that are required to create the final software to meet the product owner's vision. So at first, the product backlog is created with all the features of the final software. Feature A, feature B, feature C, feature D, feature E, feature F, and etc. But during the development, as we go through sprints, sprint number 1, sprint number 2, during the development, the backlog also can contain new features and can have changes to those initial features, and also can have defects that need to be repaired. Defects we have here in our backlog: feature A, feature B, feature C, then we have a defect. So one of the most important items is to repair defect number 23. And also the backlog can include items for technical improvements of our software. For example, refactoring. Refactoring is an activity for improving our code and have a better organization of our source code. So the product backlog can be consist of features, feature A, feature B, feature C, can include defects that should be repaired, and can include some technical improvements. For example, here we have refactoring. So product backlog can have different types of items, but they are ordered based on their priority. So the priority of these items are more than these items. High priority items are at the top of the list, and low priority items are at the bottom of the list. The product owner can collaborate with other stakeholders, internal stakeholders or external stakeholders, to create these items, to create the product backlog, to gather and define the items that should be on the product backlog. For example, defects or refactoring can be proposed by the internal stakeholders, can be proposed by the Scrum team. They can propose these items to the product owner to be on the product backlog. And as we said before, high priority items are appeared at the top of the list, and low priority items are at the bottom of the product backlog. The activity that the product owner do is called grooming. Grooming is this activity, this small gray circle that is here. This is grooming. Grooming. Grooming is done by the product owner. Grooming is done on the product backlog. We do the grooming on the product backlog. Where is the grooming in the big picture of Scrum process? Here, we have the grooming here. This is grooming. So grooming is done by the product owner and is done on the product backlog. We do this activity, the product owner do the grooming activity on the product backlog. Okay, what is the grooming? Let's talk about the grooming activity. Yes, Mr. Kashosh. It doesn't mean that we have a customer that change his or her mind constantly. We have a reasonable customer, or we suppose that we have a customer, a reasonable customer. But in today's world, we have so many changes. We have so many changes in our world. So for software, it's like other things in our today world. It's very changing. We can have changing rules. We can have changing needs of the customer. For example, the coronavirus. The coronavirus created a huge change in our software development processes. The needs of the customers were changed because of the coronavirus. So sometimes different occurrences, uh, different things that happen in our world make changes for software, make changes for customers. But we know that everything in our world is changing, so we use agile methodologies that can help us to cope with all these changes. We want to help our customer, and sometimes all these changes are not in the customer's hand. I want to say that not all the customers are happy with all these changes. They don't know what to do with these changes. So we help them with adapting the software to the changes. But Scrum strategy help us uh, to help the customer. New features can be added to the product backlog at the next sprint. Please look at here. We have a sprint here, and if the product owner has new features, he or she can add his new feature to the product backlog at the next sprint. Okay, so sometimes the product owner can add new features in the list, every place in the list. He or she can add new features to the list. Okay, thank you. Okay. So let's talk about grooming. What is the activity of grooming? Generally, the activity of creating, refining product backlog items. Sometimes it's need to estimate them, so estimating, and also prioritizing them is known as grooming. So the product owner should create items in the product backlog, should refine them. Sometimes it's need to estimate them, and also the activity of prioritizing them. All these activities are called grooming. The product backlog is a list of features that is ordered. We have the order of features is very important. Here in this backlog, feature A is more important than feature B. Feature A is more important than feature C. Feature B is more important than feature C. So the order is very important. But how we order these features, how we know the priority, how we estimate the priority of these features. To place each item in a correct sequence, we need to have different factors to estimate the priority of that feature. We use different factors. For example, we use the value, the cost of developing that feature, the knowledge and the risk of developing that knowledge or not developing that knowledge. And based on these factors, we can prioritize the items in the product backlog. As we said before, working software is very important in the agile methodologies, and also the working software is a basis for measuring our progress, and also it can be a measure for our estimation. So we can prioritize the items, the features in the product backlog based on their size, because in most of the time the size is equated with the cost. Bigger size, bigger cost. The Scrum itself doesn't dictate which size measure to use. For example, line of code or number of functionalities or anything else. The development team can decide on the measure that they want to use. But it is suggested to use relative size measures, for example, story points or ideal days. So instead of using absolute values, we can use relative size of an item for comparing it to other items and for estimating its importance and estimating its priority in correspondence to other items of the backlog. Okay, before starting to talk about sprints, I think our today's session is finished. We don't have any any time left for starting the sprints. Yes, Mr. Azobaidi. There are different techniques for doing estimation in grooming. the techniques that are using for estimation. We can use different types of estimation for prioritizing product backlog. As I said before, it's suggested to use relative measures, for example, story point or ideal days. You can use simpler measures like the line of code, estimation of line of code that you can use, and also based on the time, estimated time that you think it will uh, take to develop that feature. And also you can use risks to prioritize your items. Yes, Mr. Al-Yasiri, in RUP uh, we also have continuous delivery in RUP. In each iteration, we can have a delivery. Okay, the difference is in the time. The difference is in the focus. That in RUP we can have delivery on documentation, but in Scrum documentation is not so important. So we don't have delivery of documentation. We should have a working software as each increment. So the difference is between their goals, is between their focus on documentation, between their time. Uh, in each sprint in the Scrum can be maximum a month. So you have at maximum the maximum 4 months, 4 weeks for each sprint. But in RUP, you can have an iteration that takes, for example, 3 months. It's not important. You don't have any time limitation on each sprint. But in Scrum, you have. So the difference is in the time, the difference is in the communication, the difference is in the team size, the difference is in the final product, in delivery of each iteration or each increment. So differences are we have so many differences in Scrum and in RUP. Thank you, Mr. Ali Osteri. Thank you, Mr. Al-Zubaydi, for your good questions. Thank you for participating in the class. Okay, if there is not any question, we can finish our today's session and continue the Scrum in the next session. If you have any question, please ask your question or we can finish our class today. Thank you everybody for participating, for being present in our today's session and for participating in our class. Thank you for very good questions that you asked. I'm very happy to be your teacher because I learn in your class, and I enjoy your questions and the conversation that I have with you. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and I hope that you are happy and be happy and healthy. خدا نگهدار. خدا حافظ. Have a good day and goodbye. خدا نگهدار. خدا حافظ.